sharing my screen. Okay. So you can all see a timer, a countdown.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna move it just a minute forward because it's 9 minutes to go. Okay, so you can still see the timer, and that's the time we're all going to start a presentation. And then here is the YouTube link. Okay, I'm gonna mute everyone and I'll bring everyone back in about 9 minutes from now. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cool. Bye, see you in a bit. Okay,
Hello.
Mel and Massimo, you're on. Yep.
Yeah.
Hello. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. I'm talking from Barcelona, and in London, I have Dr. Sylvia Pan. And today I'm very happy to introduce Professor Massimo Bergamasco. He's a full professor of theory of mechanisms and machines at the Scuola Superiore Santa Anna, and he's head of the Santa studies in Pisa, which is obviously where he's speaking from. His research activities about the study and development of haptic interfaces and wearable robots that controls interaction between humans and virtual environments. His present research is focused on perception and cognitive processes, and he's been the scientific coordinator of several national and EU projects. I first met Massimo, I guess, in 1994, where he and I and some others, we had probably one of the first ever European projects in virtual environments that was called FIVE, Framework for Immersive Virtual Environments. And we've been working on and off ever since in various European projects. So it's my great pleasure today to introduce Massimo, who's going to speak about haptic interaction in virtual environments.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mel, for your kind presentation. Shall I start?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everybody. First of all, I wish to thank Professor Maslater for his kind invitation to this seminar series. It is a great opportunity to present some of the research activities that we have carried out in the last 30 years at the Perceptual Robotics Laboratory of the Scuola Sant'Anna on the topic of human interaction, particular haptic interaction with virtual environments. I like to start with this statement by Henry Wolfing, an art historian, a Swiss art historian. He has pointed out the role of perceptual modalities other than vision in the construction of our representation of the world. If we were purely optical entities, the aesthetic judgment of the physical world would be precluded to us. And sorry, the perception of the physical space as well as of other persons or other entities, other objects belonging to the environment deals not only with the visual system, but clearly it deals also with our whole body, with all the other sensory system. And as you know, we are embodied beings, and our minds, our bodies, the environment, and also our culture are all connected at different levels. So our body and also its emotional basis at the conscious or unconscious level model the way in which we think and actively engage in the world. And in particular, touch and haptic perception play a fundamental role in the relationship with others, with other people, and also with the environment. The research at the Perceptual Robotics Laboratory has been focused on, since the beginning, you know, during the last year of the 1980s, on robotic perception, in particular on haptic perception and robotic teleoperator. And this bulk of knowledge that has been generated in the field of teleoperation and robotic has been exploited during the last years of 1980s in order to study the topic of manipulative and exploratory procedures in a natural way for the human operator in virtual environments. As you can see, the, let's say, under title of our laboratory is simultaneous presence, telepresence, and virtual presence. And so we know now that the recent developments of in robotics, in virtual environments, augmented reality, will bring us in the future to interact not only with the humanoid robots or androids, but also with synthetic systems like virtual humans. So in the near future, there will be the need for new kind of interfaces that could allow us to interact with virtual humans. And in particular, also telepresence technologies is something that will drive us in this direction. Here, it is you can see some results of the research at Parker, the Perceptual Robotics Laboratory. We mainly developed two lines of research, and on the left you can see a light arm. The first line deals with the development of robotic exoskeletons. On the left you can see a light arm exoskeleton, which is worn by the human operator, and the system allow us to move, to ease her arm in a natural, and this system can apply forces to the arm, and the fetter in particular to the handle where the human is grasping it. And it can be exploited, for example, for motor neurorehabilitation purposes. On the right, you can see the other extreme of the spectrum of wearable robots, in particular a robot that can cover the whole body of the human operator and has been designed to amplify his her lifting capabilities. This system is capable, for example, of allowing the user to lift payloads up to 100 kilograms in the worst condition. That means with the two arms extended. And it can be used for activities of civil protection or other conditions in which the human being is asked to move or lift very heavy objects. The second line of research, here we are, is related to the development of immersive virtual environments, which is an example of an immersive environment that we have obtained in developing not only the visualization hardware, but also all the software that drive the different arrays of projectors in real time in order to have a and realistic immersion in the virtual space. So by considering the research in the field of virtual environments, our aim has been that of trying to develop immersive virtual environments that are able to integrate different perceptual modalities, not only visual or auditory, but as well as also haptic feedback to the human operator. And here you can see, for example, an example of the results of some projects of ours. You can see a human operator visually immersed in a 3D virtual environment, which is being able to perceive binaural audio. And in terms of binaural audio, we have collaborated in several projects with the University of Bochum in Germany, and also with the Aalborg University in Denmark, and as well as all haptic feedback. You see, the robotic exoskeleton is connected with the finger at the human operator, forces the fingertip when the human hand touches, for example, the virtual object in what is called a collocation condition. So you see that the multimodal interaction with virtual environment, it is the fundamental topic that integrates both the mechanical robotic aspects of research in our laboratory as well that the line of research on virtual environments. So we developed several haptic interfaces, as you have seen, and you see this is a sort of phylogenesis diagram of our activities. The research at the robotics laboratory started at the end of 1980s with the work on robotic exoskeleton, and soon after we entered in the field of general haptic interfaces. And here the first line of research on exoskeleton is still active today, still alive today, clearly. Here you can see the first version of ARM exoskeleton that has been completed in 92, 93. And you can see that the system is completely supported by the human operator. In this way, the human operator is able to have a large mobility workspace. It's not fixed to remain in a fixed condition. And it shows, you see, different actuated joints at the level of all the upper limb. We have a 5 or 7 degrees of freedom version. And to this, it is possible for the human operator to interact with the virtual environment, since the actuators of the system are able to generate forces at the level of the endo, where the end is located. Here you can see that the system is able also to compensate gravity, the weight of the system. And this is the concept of haptic interaction with virtual environments performed through a ARM exoskeleton. You see that the human operator is wearing the interface, is free to move his or her hand, and with his hand is able to control in real time the movement of the virtual end. And when the virtual end, when the collision detection module detects the contact with the virtual object, clearly the system generates a virtual contact force, which is fed back to the and perceived by the human operator's end. And the same concept of exoskeleton for the arm has been applied also for the hand. Here you can see the first version of the hand force feedback system, a device that you see is able to cover the dorsal part of the hand. And these are the first experiments that we made in order to interacting with the simple spheres, simple virtual object with this kind of interface system. And clearly, the design of a hand exoskeleton has been particularly addressed in detail. And this is a new version that we have done in 2007. This is the last system that we have developed for the index and thumb fingers. But it is interesting to see how, by means of this system, it is possible for the human operator to control an exploratory procedure with a virtual object. We see it is a copy of a textile, okay? It simulates the behavior of a textile. So it is difficult to obtain in real time this kind of behavior. And clearly with this system, it is possible also to perform specific operation in terms of remote operation. For example, manipulative operation performs at a distance. Here you can see what is called immersive telepresence, because the user is wearing a head-mounted display by which he is able to control the movement of remote robots. You see, this is the indirect video that takes into account the behavior of the two robotic fingers that accompany the person in order to grasp this fruit with 2 points of contact and pick it up and put it down on the table. So these clearly the importance of having information related to the contact of an operation that is performed at a geographical distance is extremely important in order to perform completely the task. A second line of research deals with the haptic interfaces, and this line started soon after having designed the arm and the hand exoskeleton, and is still very active. Here you can see a plethora of haptic interfaces that has been designed so far. And there are some examples here with different kinematic solutions from the mechanical point of view. We have a planar as well as spatial mechanisms with 2, 3 degrees of freedom, 6 degrees of freedom, capable of transmitting forces at the point of contact with the human hand, with the human body. Usually you see in some of the picture, you can see that the user is grasping a stylus connected to a specific point of the mechanism to which he is able to perceive the contact forces generated by the robotic system. Another activity that we have carried out has been the development of specific arrays of tactile effectors. Here you can see the results of a European project called SCATIS that we have done. We started in 1991 and finished in 1995. And this system, this tactile effector system, integrates two functionalities. The first is the indentation component. That means an array of microsolenoids are able to create spatial stimuli, means haptic textures at the level of the fingertip. But we have also introduced here, another electronic equipment, a Peltier cell, that is able to generate what is called thermal feedback. That means to control the input or output of heat at the level of the fingertip. In this way, the user is able to control or to perceive the haptic texture as well as temperature conditions of different materials of the virtual objects. We integrated, you see, a set of these tactile effectors on a sensorized glove in order to allow the human operator to perform manipulative and exploratory procedures of virtual objects in virtual environment. At the beginning of 1990s, we started the research on immersive virtual environments that developed, as you can see here in the two branches, also with augmented reality. Franco Tecchia and Marcello Carozzino, two colleagues of mine, developed very graphics libraries for generating appropriate virtual environment engines in the framework of research that addressed, in particular, the topic of representing complex virtual environments in real time. They called the libraries XVR, and these libraries were considered a sort of de facto standard in Europe in the framework of specific European projects. And there are some examples of the immersive virtual environment exploited, in this case, for example, for industrial application, such as, for example, industrial plant maintenance. Here, the human operator, before entering into the real plant where there are hostile conditions due to high temperature, gases, and so on, is able to study the layout of the plant before entering in order to minimize the time of performance in the real environment. Or, for example, here it is an example on how our research moved to the concept of mixed reality. In particular, here you can see how augmented virtuality experiences can be conducted in real time inside an immersive visualization system like the cave. Or here you can see an example of the transfer of skill from an expert. Here you see the colleague of mine, Franco Tecchia, who is the expert, wearing an augmented reality head-mounted display, who is able to transmit directly with the movement of his hands the correct information to another person. You see this girl on the left, that in real time receives direct information, direct visual information of the movements and of the operation that she has to perform with his hands on the object that there are in front of her, and she doesn't know how to perform. So is following directly without any other type of information, written or spoken, but in this way she's able to perform and complete the task in an easy way. And I show you this example of our research because this is the first person perspective, visual first person perspective of the expert, that you see is able to see in front of us, of him, his hands that are able to enter in contact with the objects, the real objects that are located in front, in a remote space, in front of the non-expert person. And here, in this case, clearly, the availability of haptic interfaces could have helped the expert to accelerate and to perform the task. Or, for example, also in the other operation like this one, which is in training, for example, in a virtual environment, you see in a 3D space, the user is able to locate the different parts of the compound to be integrated, to be assembled, and is able to see his hands in real time in his visual space with his first person perspective. And clearly, also in this case, the availability of simple tactile effectors could have helped a lot the realization, the accomplishment of the task. We had some applications of our interfaces, of our haptic interfaces. One is what we have called the Museum of Pure Form, which is an application in order to allow persons to perceive haptically the shapes of virtual sculptures that are present, for example, inside museums. Here it is the concept. The user with the haptic interface is able to interact haptically with the digital sculpture databases that are located, for example, in the museum, very real one. And so this kind of applications for museums, for cultural heritage in general, can allow visitors to interact, physically interact with digital models of sculptures to the sense of touch. And here it is an example of the use of the exoskeleton inside the immersive virtual environment that we have realized, for example, at the University College London in UK, here there are a few examples of the implementation. Here, for example, we made it at the National Museum in Stockholm in different, clearly setup. Another setup has been done at the Museum dell'Opera in Pisa. You see the haptic interfaces are not the exoskeleton, but are specific 3 degrees of freedom force controller that can be used in order to perceive, to allow the user to interact, you can see, with digital copies of a sculpture. Here you can see that to the two haptic interfaces that are connected respectively to the thumb and to the index, the user is able to control the movement of the spherical cursors, you see, that are in the virtual environment. Once clearly there is the detection of the contact between the cursor and the sculpture is detected, a contact force is modeled and replicated at the level of his fingers. And clearly we have clearly moved also all this kind of side, the cave, by exploiting also hand exoskeletons. Another application, another result of our systems is that of using haptic interfaces as a primary control inside vehicle simulators. This is a simulator that exploits immersive virtual environments. This has been done in Germany, in Stuttgart, and you can see that here the internal aspect of the car is being completely virtualized. It is completely 3D, shown in 3D graphical. There is no a real cockpit, for example, as it happens usually in vehicle simulators. And the contact of the hands of the user, of the pilot or the driver with for example, the primary controls like the steering wheel or the gear shift handles and so on, has been replaced by utilizing haptic interfaces, in particular here arm exoskeletons. And this is something already several years ago, but you can see how the user is able to drive only by exploiting his movements of these hands that feels the contact with the primary controls to the exoskeletons. We have also other examples in which haptic could be extremely useful. In particular, here I'm sorry, the video is in Italian because we have only that version, but in particular, when we want to not only record, but also transfer, in particular, an active procedures performed, for example, by an artist or by an artisan or a craftsman while working in a specific environment. For example, here we are working on etching techniques, you know. We have been able to record all the process and exploiting augmented virtuality and augmented reality in order to describe this to, for example, students, or as well as to maintain, let's say, the memory of the whole process in a digitized form. And here you can see, for example, clearly it was clearly shown in a head-mounted display, so it was a stereo images, and clearly the effect of having haptic interfaces, for example, with simple gloves, could have helped a lot the results of transferring skills, in particular inactive skills, to other persons. Clearly, haptics is extremely useful. As you can see how the sense of touch enters directly in the, for example, what is called the rubber hand illusion that started all this research activity on embodiment. The same also applies also for the sense of, let's say, the recreation of the illusion of out-of-body experiences in which you see these results performed by Eric Herson in Karolinska Institute. The effect of touch is extremely important in order to generate this sense of one's body place dislocated to the position in which is veridically positioned. We have utilized the same aspects in the very project coordinated by Professor Meslater, which we were responsible for developing what was called the embodiment station. Embodiment station is a sort of technological system, in particular exploiting different kind of perceptual modalities in order to allow a person to feel himself in the shoes of, for example, another person, or also even in a robotic being. Here, for example, you see the colleague of mine, Chiara Evangelista, wearing a sort of helmet possessing stereo cameras and as well as inertial sensors. Here you can see while she's walking in the country, the inertial sensors are able to record as acceleration and angular velocities that are clearly recorded together with the two stereo images. And these information are exploited in order to generate the illusion of walking to a person which should stay in a horizontal position, like for example in a hospital or in the house. The person is wearing head-mounted display, and these are the recordings of acceleration and angular velocity that are exploited in order to move this sort of vestibular feedback platform, which is a 6-degree of freedom parallel structure that is able to regenerate and generate, let's say, the vestibular information of during the working condition of in a remote environment. We added also in the framework of this project, we added also a sort of mechanical stimulation at the level of tendons, for example, tendons of the muscle or the upper arm or the lower arm, in order to generate the illusion of apparent movement in the joints. Also when clearly there is no real movement at the level of the limbs, You see, the generation of this illusion is clearly tied, is clearly related to the stimulation of the direct stimulation of the neuromuscular sensors at the level of the muscle fibers. And clearly this kind of vibration should be of in the range between 70 and 30 Hertz, and can be done in different positions. Here you can see at the level of the elbow joint, and a combination clearly of this stimulation in the different joints can generate the perception of complex illusory movements in the different joints, like for example, writing a specific letter or a pattern of walking. And here it is the implementation that we have done in what are called the proprioceptive vest, which is a sort of haptic interfaces in specific joints, in which we have specific actuating modules at the level of the knee, for example, or of the ankle. And clearly, with this, it is possible to, this is another picture, we obtain the possibility for a person to feel himself in the shoes of another person that who is working in a remote environment. You see here the subject located on the chair he wears clearly head-mounted display, and this is an example of the working inside a virtual environment. Okay, clearly let's say vestibular information here have been previously recorded and can be generated and not only at the general level of the vestibular system, but also by adding stimulation in the different joints of the legs, in particular the knees and the ankle. See, this is, for example, you have here, it depicts the illusion of this effect. This is sort of stimulator, haptic stimulators at the level of the tendons at the level of the rear knee, and clearly this can help in order to add the perception of real working in a virtual environment. The same concept of proprioceptive vest and embodiment station can be done in order to allow a person to feel himself in the shoes of another person, for example, operating in a remote environment with, like, as you can see, with the body extender, with this sort of exoskeletons. Clearly, it is possible not only to record all the movement of the, but it is possible to record the stereo video images, and inside the system, the embodiment system, it is possible to allow the person to feel himself inside the robot, which is located clearly in a remote environment. And it is interesting to exploit also haptic interfaces, you see, since haptic interfaces, like, for example, in this light exoskeleton, when the person wears the system is able to record whatever kind of movement and being able to faithfully replicate the trajectories that has been imparted, for example, by an external subject, as you have seen, in a specific condition. And this, for example, it can be extremely useful for neuro rehabilitation purposes. In fact, a medical doctor can be able to follow more than one person at a time. But clearly, also when the interaction becomes more stronger, for example, like in a fight or with an opponent, the same thing can be recorded, okay? The movement can be recorded and replicated to the user. And in this way, we have exploited, you know, this setup of having recorded a specific activity, you see, in order to allow the user to interact, for example, with an avatar during a fight or during an opponent interaction with another avatar in a realistic condition, adding not only clearly, not only having a visual, let's say, representation of the virtual environment, but also an haptical and acoustical feedback. And this is something that brought us also to consider the same haptic interfaces also for other purposes. Here, for example, you see how our system can be used for neurorehabilitation, and also in other applications are, for example, you see these are new kind of systems, haptic interfaces that are located, you see, on the finger, of the thumb and the finger. These are what we call the encounter type haptics, in the sense that they are able to bring a plate in contact with the fingertips, and these are simple and lightweight systems that can be used in order to generate specific contact areas locally at the level of the fingertips. This system can be exploited, for example, for neurorehabilitation of with cerebral palsy, and clearly the virtual environment you see is represented like a gaming scenario in which clearly the protocol requires to perform specific targeted motor tasks. Clearly the child can exploit visual feedback on a head-mounted display, as well as with simple, you see, simple wearable haptic devices that are, you see, integrated with optical position tracking in order to detect the movement of his or her fingers. And clearly, it is interesting to address today also the integration of this kind of haptic systems in the whole category of virtual serious games, you know, and in particular, the device, the simple device that you see depicted on the right, is able to generate three components of forces, and in particular, there is a realistic deformation of the fingertips during the interaction with virtual environments. Here there are also different kinds of physical interaction. Here you see also in terms of serious games, what we call the labyrinth game, in which you see you ask the child to follow specific trajectories, or for example, the money box game, in which it is asked to the child to insert a coin, a virtual coin, a token, virtual token in specific holes. And this is something that can help the child to clearly perform specific motor functions. Or for example, here, you can see the development of another clearly simple mechanism that can be located very easily at the level of the fingertips, which is a sort of thimble, and that can be exploited in order to allow the person to perceive the contact clearly with simple objects and manipulate also very simply, you see, with 2 points of contact, specific virtual objects. And or for example, here this is the new system that is going to be used, developed, you know, recently developed for thermal feedback. And also in this case, the system is very light and can be easily utilized even by children. And the last system that we are developing is this sort of other fingertip haptic system for rendering share. In particular, it is developed by exploiting share memory alloys wires that are able to generate specific contact forces at the level of the fingertips. And the last system that has been developed here is exploited liquid electroactive polymers. In particular, we are working on developing specific small, very small actuators that exploit this sort of polymers that once they are applied voltage are able to generate clearly contact forces in specific small areas of the fingertips. The same group developed, headed by Marco Fontana, here you see, is exploiting this sort of haptic interfaces for trying to damp the tremor of persons affected, for example, by multiple sclerosis. Here you can see, for example, how the haptic interface is able of damping the effect and trying to clearly of the effect of the tremor and maintaining in general, you see, the voluntary movements of the person. And one of the last projects in which we are involved is related to, it's called Replaying Doc, and it is a project that addresses disorders of people affected by disorders of consciousness, in particular the rehabilitation of disorders of consciousness. And in particular, we exploited the first-person perspective of multimodal recordings of a person that is able to record, let's say, exactly in different conditions, for example, in working condition or inside the home, is her home, the life, specific experiences of life of a person that is constrained to stay, which is affected by clearly a disorder of consciousness, and she is constrained to stay on bed, for example, in the hospital and so on. And this clearly, this recording, multimodal recording of visual, auditory, as well as haptic, as well as also other stimuli, okay, can be played back to the person affected by disorder of consciousness in specific way through clearly virtual environment technologies. So you see, for example, there the image on the left, the sort of person wearing what is called the capturing system, that is the system that is able to acquire stimuli from real life experiences clearly. Then clearly all these multimodal data, visual, haptics, and audio and so on, that are captured can be used in order to stimulate the patient with disorder of consciousness. Clearly, the multimodal captured data has been captured by the actor in real life, can be stored and also edited in an immersive virtual environment in order to generate this sort of feedback to the patient in an appropriate way. At the border of our research on haptic interfaces, in particular on touch, tactile stimuli, clearly is what we call affective touch in virtual environments. Clearly, the traditional way of classifying touch in terms of, let's say, touch, indentation, thermal stimuli, even pain, are known as discriminative touch. But we are now addressing this sort of different component of the tactile stimulation, which is that of affective or emotional touch. It is something that we believe in the future will be extremely important in order to allow the human beings in order to tackle the complexity of this integration between digital and real domains. I would like to put here in conclusion this event that we called Understanding the Other, because we believe this has been done for the 20 years to celebrate in 2016, the 20 years of life of the Perceptor Robotics Laboratory. And it has been done in Rome at the Palazzo delle Esposizioni, because we believe that with this kind of technologies that allows also to control the interaction between different persons, human beings in virtual environments, virtual humans and so on, could be clearly a technological asset that could be exploited in the future in order to study and to better generate the interaction and the understanding with the other persons. I'm glad to here report a specific statement by the artist Olafur Eliasson, in which says that art is underlying the role of the art in changing the world. And it is important, you see, to see that art is actually a part of reality making. And each small drawing with a pencil essentially pushes the world. I thank you for your attention.
Hi, thank you very much for this tour de force of the work that you've been doing. I cannot
hear.
Hello?
No, I can hear you. I can hear you, no problem. Massimo, can you hear me? I think that's his speaker. Let's type.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you, yes.
I cannot hear you.
It's probably your speaker.
Okay, it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you very much, Massimo, for this tour de force of the work you've been doing in this, actually, I think, very difficult area of haptics.
Thank you.
Questions have come through. Sylvia, I've lost all the questions. Oh, no, hang on a second. Oh, yeah, now they've come. I've lost a lot of questions because my internet failed a few minutes ago and I had to restart again. So
yeah, it's okay. Don't worry. I have everything there. So
okay.
Yeah, can you see them, or do you want me to read?
Redo them, yeah, because I only see 2 questions and I know there were more.
Okay, I'll put the first question here. You can see them now from Unication R. That's the very first one.
No, I can't see that one. I can't see that one.
I see.
Okay, I'll read it out now.
Okay.
So from Unication, in the thermal feedback device, is there a concept of a temperature rendering rate, like the number of discrete temperatures that can be rendered per second?
Yes. May I answer?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. What a thermal feedback device does is not exactly rendering a specific temperature, but is able to generate or subtract heat from the body to which it is in contact. So there is a rate of heat transmission, okay? And it is not controlled in terms of, let's say, temperature in this way. So we have seen that with the system that we have developed already, let's say more than 20 years ago, at that time, since we were using Peltier cells, the the frequency of being able to generate a specific transfer of heat from the virtual environment and the human hand, that means from the interface, thermal interface, and the human hand, was very poor, in the sense that it requires there was a frequency cutoff of 1.25. So that means that it was very, how to say, not so fast. It is, you know, when you touch an object with your hand, you are perceiving if it is colder or hotter with respect to your hand in a very, very, very easily and in a very short time, instantly, you know. And pain nociceptors are working in that domain of very fast times. So the system that we developed in 1992-93 was poor in these performances. And with the last system, we are still, let's say, evaluating their performances. Yes, I don't know if I have answered to your question.
Thanks very much. There's a question from Ewan Lavoy, who says, wonderful talk. Do participants experience motion sickness when walking is simulated visually and proprioceptively using the proprioceptive illusion suit, but there's not vestibular feedback?
Let's say that we didn't let's say evaluated as far as I know, because this has been done by a group led by Antonio Frisoli and De Leonardis, is this activity. In particular, I don't know whether they have evaluated the motion sickness experiences, so I cannot properly answer to this question in terms of motion sickness. Yeah.
Thank you.
I see that the same person, Ewan Lavoy, has asked also another question related to
go ahead with that.
Sickness. Clearly, this is extremely important question, you know, especially for, let's say, future developments of vehicle simulators, you know. There will be an extremely important aspect of having the development in the future of vehicle simulators, not only vehicle for transport of people, but also industrial vehicle simulators, in which, for example, security and safety issues are very important for the future of working condition of the people, you know. And I think that this is extremely important. You know, the aspect of the control of motion simulators is a very delicate issue, because the control of a vehicle simulator requires the development of specific filters that are able to generate the appropriate perception, vestibular perception. And this is a point that in the future should be surely addressed by research.
Thanks. There's a question from Uni Krishnan, who asks, in the thermal feedback device, is there a constant temperature rendering rate, like the number of discrete temperatures that can be rendered per second?
Yes, I think this question is similar to the previous one. And it depends. It depends on the control aspect of the device, and depends also on which kind of technology you are using. I repeat, we were using in the first version of our system Peltier cells, and we have seen that by generating, you see, specific control laws of in order to allow the system to generate specific heat transfer towards or against the skin, we didn't succeed to achieve rendering, let's say, adequate rendering rate. It was very difficult due to the technology itself, you know. So rendering rate, in order to answer to the question more specifically, rendering rate that we obtained 20 years ago with the Peltier cell were not adequate in order to have a realistic contact. Because as I said before, in reality, when you touch an object, you have an immediate information, let's say, of data related or perception or of the thermal condition of the external object, okay? We had delays, and so we were not able to manage properly this condition. Yeah.
Now you're muted.
Hello?
Hello, sorry. Replay of recorded exoskeleton movements or other haptic devices in general could it be used to improve task learning based on muscle memory? This is a question from Daniel Lobo Cuenca.
Yes, I think that the answer is yes. However, I think that clearly if the question is related to the memory of performing a specific task, not a specific movement, okay, with example for a joint, of only a joint, but a specific task, I think that the learning, the transfer of a specific skill should also take into account not only the replication of the movement, but also the context and the motivation by which you perform that task, okay? So I think that under this view, a more complete, let's say, context-based training, I think that virtual environment could in the future say a lot of things, you know. They will be very adequate technology in order to increase the way by which person are able to learn specific movements, because they are able to contextualize and motivate the person. It is the same difference, for example, when you want to play a specific sport, if you are doing in a gymnasium or in your house or in a real context, like a play field or something like that. Yeah.
Thanks. There's a question from Kantan Dev. Do you find many people are wary of trying haptic devices for fear of injury? How safe are they in general?
I think that if you know, as you have seen perhaps in the presentation, there are different kinds of haptic devices. If you refer in your question to wearing or trying robotic exoskeletons, clearly there could be some fear. However, these sort of systems can have a lot of safety subsystems, you know, components that can be implemented. For example, we have at the first, let's say, at the first level, from the mechanical point of view, we are designing joints. All the joints are designed in order not to go over the joint limits of the human body. So there is a biomechanical intrinsic safety system, you know, which is due on how you design the joints, okay? So you are safe from that point of view. Then there are also aspects related to the control, to the electronics of the sensors and so on. But however, before using this system in an industrial or in a real environment, the system should be clearly evaluated at the level of the regulation in Europe, for example. And if it doesn't pass, if the design and the system doesn't pass the certification, European certification, cannot be used, you know. Clearly, in research, in a laboratory, this is not necessary. However, in more than 30 years of research with this system, we never had the minimum problem. So I think that if during the design, the designer addresses intrinsic safety systems, in particular, as I said, mechanical limits, electronic limits and so on, limitations and so on, the system can be used as other machines, yes.
Thank you. Massimo, are you okay to take like 3 more questions?
Sure, sure.
Okay. There's one from Robert, actually 2 from Robert Bellerman.
Yeah.
Many devices you've shown look very bulky and heavy, which leads to high inertia, which I imagine can be very difficult to deal with if you want to realistically render haptics. So he was wondering, how is it done?
It is true that the systems that we have seen are bulky, are heavy. In particular, you see the body extender weights, for example, the one that covers all the body, weighs 160 kilograms, you see, which is comparable to the weight of a big person, you know. However, the control of the movement is all, the control system is able to generate 0 forces at the level of the attachment points with the body. So the user is able to move, but is not moving against the inertia, against the weight of the system. He is moving very freely, and is the control of the actuation systems of the haptic interface of the exoskeleton that is reading in whatever kind of configuration specific weights and conditions of inertia, and they will render their 0. So the user is moving, they say, he feels that there is something, you know, around him, but he has not to work against the weight of the system.
Thank you. Robert Bellerman also wonders whether these kind of devices will be available commercially.
Yes. The exoskeletons of the arm and of the legs, I haven't shown exoskeleton for the legs during the presentation, but the ones that we have seen for the arm and are already commercially available. We have already commercialized them, especially for purposes of motor neurorehabilitation. We are now trying to commercialize systems for the rehabilitation of the leg, on the leg, while in terms of body extenders, you know, the heavy, bulky system for the whole body, we have only realized 1 prototype, and that has been an extremely useful activity in terms of, in order to acquire experience, because we have now designed lightweight system for the whole body, clearly with lower performances in terms of weights that you can lift, but that can be soon commercialized in the industrial environment. Yeah.
Thank you. Stephanie Fernier asks, Thank you very much, Massimo. Have you ever tried haptics with piezoelectric technology? If so, what do you think?
No, we haven't so far. When I was young, that means 40 years ago, I tried, I was working on PVDF, which is a polymer, piezoelectric polymer. And that was my only experience of using piezoelectric polymers for tactile sensors for robots, okay? But we never used so far piezoelectric technology for actuators, as actuators. I know that can be extremely useful, but so far we didn't use so far. And I think it could be, since they are very light, you know. I remember when I was using PVDF, this piezoelectric polymer for sensors, the weight is very, very, very low. And I think they could have specific fields of application also for haptic effectors.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Panos Kurtesis says, thank you very much for this interesting presentation. I saw that you compared performance on some tasks, for example, the labyrinth, which require a sense of touch. Do you think that tactile haptics would increase performance on tasks where touch is of secondary importance? For example, trying to memorize the appearance of a statue, like visual memory.
Yes, I think that clearly we work with blind persons also. And in this case, I think that touch is a fundamental component of a perception of the world. And also this can help us in order to understand better what kind of representation of the objects belonging to the world we are doing. So I understand, I agree with you that let's say, memory or of the shape of a sculpture for a normal subject can be clearly obtained mainly with sight, with vision, because usually this sort of objects cannot be touched in the museums. You know, it is forbidden to touch sculptures and so on. But in any case, I think that although vision works mainly as a long distance, they say, not in contact, perceptual system, you perceive the shape of an object not by touching, not by entering in contact. I think that when you want to explore with your hand in order to apprehend specific features of an object, you have to touch it. If you want to touch, if you want to see, for example, the texture, the sharpness, if you want to know whether the system, it is hard or soft and so on, you usually use your hand, you know, although you don't have learned before by vision. But I think I don't see a duality, you know, between vision and touch. I want to see an integration of these two fundamental perceptual systems.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Last question, which is a very topical one, from Daniel Salamanca. Do you think you have new challenges in your field of study with all these social distancing rules that we're living in and that we will? If you do, which ones? Yeah.
Yes, I think yes, because you know, as I say, this sort of emotional or affective touch issue is something that in the future will be addressed in the field of haptic interfaces. Yes.
Okay, so thanks very much,
Thank
Massimo, for your
Thank
time
you.
and such an interesting, important talk.
Thank you.
So haptics has somehow become more important in the past couple of months with people craving to touch each other. And I hope this research will, this kind of research will lead to improvements of this if there's any future lockdowns. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And also for your time today. Wait a minute, stay on. I'd like also to thank Dr. Sylvia Pan, who's been making this work behind the scenes. And also today we had Chiara Evangelista and Francesca Farinelli, who were helping to field the questions from YouTube. On next Monday, Professor Albert Skip Rizzo will talk about virtual reality therapy for post-traumatic stress disorder. That's the 8th of June at 6 o'clock CEST Brussels time. So thanks very much to everyone and see you Monday.